And, from my perspective, from the media perspective, a lot was made out of this, so I'm sure most of our listeners are familiar. But, this last week, Ronda did none of the media.
She's paying for that now, huh?
She is, because the typical way this happens is, so let's say this fight was on a Friday, which is rare. Normally they're on Saturdays. But usually the weigh-ins course of the day before the fight, the day before that, so 48 hours, that Thursday when the fights are on Saturdays, that's a media day. So a lot of times, like the audio I played last week on the show, and we'll play some of the press conference audio of me talking to some of the fighters after the fight this past Friday night. But the audio we played on the last episode, I gather at media day. I'm in a big room, bunch of other media people. We go around. You've been to a million of these, Frank, been a part of them, and obviously. If you're in the main event, you're going to get more press requests than anybody else. If you're the biggest name in the promotion or one of the biggest names like Ronda is, you're going to get more requests. But in a really unprecedented move, she got it worked out to where she did not have to do any of that. In fact, when I went to the official weigh-ins, which were Thursday morning, those are done now at like 9 a.m., she was first on the scale, came through the curtain, got on the scale, weighed in, and they were asking each fighter to stay on the scale for 5 seconds for still photography. Once they hit the weight, just pose whatever you're going to do. She hit the weight, got off the scale, didn't even wait 1 second, and they were trying to sort of call her back onto the scale. None of that. She was right out of there. And then, of course, she was a no-show at the post-fight press conference. Now, after being finished the way she was, you understand maybe why she wasn't going to be interviewed after the fight. But on the way down... That's
her choice.
Yeah, that is.
No, that was completely her choice.
Oh, to not be interviewed.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah. But even if...
In fact, once we're done, just so you know where I'm going, in case I forget my thought, I think that's what screwed her the worst. I don't think the media blackout leading up...
What did?
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Had she, at the end of that fight, not done what she did for her first loss, run out of the octagon so the fight was over with, in this fight she did the same exact thing. In contrast, Dominic Cruz just lost for the very first time at 135 pounds, second time in his whole professional career ever. Pretty much was dominated every round. I mean, the first couple rounds were close. I shouldn't say dominated, but it got worse and worse as it went on. Cody Garbrandt completely had him figured out, had a better game plan. His boxing, obviously, just, he beat the shit out of Dominic. And I didn't think that was possible. You know, I thought that Cruz was going to win the fight. No one talks more shit than Cruz. I mean, few people. You know what I mean? He's up there, You want to talk about shit talkers. That guy can sell a fight. He's good at it. And
this one in
smart.
particular.
Oh, man, he's smart, Real savvy about what he says. He kicked Cody Garbrandt to that aspect of it as far as, the leading up to the fight, just that Cody, kicked his ass in the fight. He got his ass kicked, loses the title, lost his first time at bantamweight, second time ever in his entire career to an alpha male, which that has to kind of sting a little bit with him. He stayed there afterwards, acknowledged his opponent, said, hey, kicked my ass. He did a good job. Hopefully I can get back out here. But, hey, he's a better man today. Had Ronda done that, her media blackout leading up, gets knocked out in 48 seconds, or, referee stopped her from, basically getting Holly homed again. Had she, after, Manny Nunes spoke, sat there and took the mic the second time, is usually what is the etiquette of championship or 5-round fights. The other individual, I've been there. I remember against JDS, got my ass kicked, sat there, waited for him to get acknowledged and congratulated, and then, and then had to speak. It's not a great experience. It's, you have to humble yourself. And so had she at that moment said, look, I want to, I really was focused on this. I even turned down all media leading up to the fight because I thought maybe that was a distraction last time. I was really focused on just winning this more than anything. I think then we would have looked back upon her media blackout, jumping off the scale, with sympathy. We would have been able to relate to somebody that wanted something very badly, so they were trying to make concessions in any way they could to make sure they were victorious. She was, I gave up this, I gave up that. I purposely didn't do media because I really wanted to focus on leading up to this fight. I think that, I mean, if you would have heard her say that, would you not have been like, oh, okay, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, not that you didn't understand it to begin with, but I think it would have completely just diffused any of the like, she doesn't even do media. UFC lets her get away with this. You would have been able to relate to a person who says, hey, look, I got my ass kicked the last time. I just lost my title. I wanted my title back. I've dedicated a lot of time to focusing and training. You know, I've really was strung, 6 ways to Sunday, leading up to my last fight, all the different, obligations I had. So I really thought maybe that distracted me. So I really just focused on this fight. And it didn't turn out in my favor again. I'm going to have to really go back. I think then people would have been, and been on her side. But then, you lose the fight. You had no press leading up to it. And then as soon as you get your opponent gets their hand raised, they sit there and go, hey, do you want to say something? No. She shakes her head. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to get out of here. Well, you're not talking. Well, people can't relate to you. They don't understand you. They don't like you. I mean, that's just how it works. You know what I mean?
And then doesn't attend the post-fight press conference. Because even then, you had yet another shot.
You're right. On top of that, you could have gone to the post-fight conference, gathered yourself up. I mean, what fighter in UFC has not had their ass kicked and had to go to the post-fight conference?
You mentioned Dominic Cruz, and we're going to get some audio here in a second of my questions to Dominic Cruz after the fight, after he lost the co-main event. But there could not have been a greater study in contrast, because this guy not only attended the post-fight press conference, stood the whole time and just took command of the... He basically gave a 5-star analysis of how his opponent beat him. It's like he was an analyst for his own fight.
That's impressive.
He gave all the credit where it was due. He still, he wasn't broken. I mean, I think he still had plenty of confidence. I'm sure he wants that fight again, etc. But it wasn't.
Conor McGregor showed up to the post-fight
That's
conference.
another one. That's another one.
There is the king of shit talking.
Yep.
Here he's the featherweight champ of the world. He goes out and gets choked out by Nate Diaz. He put a suit on and showed up.
Yep.
He did his post-fight interview inside the cage, took a shower, put a suit on, and showed up. Hey, you know what? And he was humble about the situation, going, look, his energy was better than mine. I forgot the exact words he used, but he didn't make excuses. He didn't say he had an injury. He didn't say he had a cold. So, hey, you know what? You walk in here, this is the UFC. Sometimes you get your ass kicked.
Well, and see, fans, and for that matter, media, and then media is going to, write the words and say the words that are going to be passed to the fans. I mean, we're basically, they're kind of like their eyes and ears there. They're representatives in terms of getting the news coming out of the fights. You have to, if people have to be able to see you in defeat to be able to like you or sympathize with you in defeat. If you don't give them that option, if it's either you see me win or you don't see me at all, well, then you're really kind of handcuffing the fans, because what that means is, okay, they're allowed to like you in victory, but in defeat, you're nowhere to be found. So they don't have a choice. They don't get to have an opinion, really, because they just know you're not there, and they know that the person who beat you is in most cases probably fairly gracious about it. Now, whether or not you think Amanda Nunes was, we can talk about that in a second, because I've got some audio of that as well. Me talking to her after the fight. She was pleasant, but she posted a particularly curious thing on Twitter right after her victory. But just to finish on Ronda here, I think the problem is that when she doesn't give fans that option. I mean, media. Look, I don't care, honestly. I've always liked Ronda. I've always had pleasant experiences with her.
She's definitely a split.
Oh, yeah.
Who I meet in person, I've now probably been in social surroundings with her without cameras pointing at us, probably about 3 or 4 different times, between the gym, backstage at different press conferences and whatnot. And she's a pleasant person. She's actually really nice. She's kind of laid back. Somehow, and the other thing too that I thought that kind of grated me a little bit, that actually annoyed me, which I think he didn't help her at all, is when people are upset with someone's behavior, giving insight is one thing, But if it crosses that line towards an excuse, that only enrages people more, especially when it comes from the top. Then they sit there and go, "Oh, well, she is taken care of. Look how she's cuddled."
You're talking about Dana
saying that. Well, you gotta understand that Ronda's very competitive, and I wanted to laugh about that. I'm like, well, no shit, man. You might not be that competitive. That's why you never fought before. But we're all very competitive who fought. There is nobody who walks into the octagon who's not competitive at some degree or another, and to sit there and go that you're so competitive that, well, that's why you act like an asshole afterwards. I'm all, no, being super competitive is not an excuse for bad sportsmanship. I mean, you could sit there, if a person's a bad sport, about a sore loser, sore winner, you could fall back and say, well, they're super competitive, or you can say what the rest of us say, go, you're actually just a shitty sport.
Well, and there's also a whole nother level of your competitiveness to appreciate after we see you lose. And I'll go back to the Conor McGregor example, because I was in that press conference. When he lost to Nate Diaz, the thought was, okay, we've heard he lost outside of before he was in the UFC, but we weren't over in Ireland covering those fights. So what do you get when Conor McGregor loses? You know what he sounds like when he wins. You know what he sounds like when he's building up a fight. How is this going to sound? Well, it turns out he sounded human. And he did that for 48 hours. And then he was right back to being same old confident Conor McGregor, and in fact, a bigger name and more omnipresent than he was even before he lost. And I thought that was an opportunity that Ronda had but chose not to take advantage of. Now, all of this is her choice. And if she, it may just be that it's as simple as she's got other interests in life now. She's made an incredible amount of money. She got a guaranteed $3 million for that fight. Amanda Nunes got $200,000, and I think that was including the $100,000 win bonus. So, you talk about studies and contrasts here of somebody who's still literally fighting to pay bills and somebody who doesn't need to fight at all. There was no financial incentive for her to do that, but
I would be shocked if she fights again.
I would too. I think that, because here's the thing. The options that you laid out for her, which are viable options, I think, for any other lesser fighter. Okay, drop down, fight somebody in the, number 9, number 10, something like that. Rebuild yourself. All those things you said. Yeah, that's a great idea for, I don't know, maybe somebody like Paige Van Zandt, a really young fighter who has had a lot very soon and got some holes exposed in her game and now needs to go back to the drawing board and reinvent. But I don't think Ronda's way past that point. And I think she's also demonstrated to us mentally that this is her. It's either I dominate everyone, or if I'm not dominating, I just kind of I don't know how to halfway dominate. I don't know how to just compete. How about that? I know how to dominate if I'm Ronda Rousey, but just run of the mill competitiveness, like where I'm a minus 100 against my opponent that I'm going in, a slight favorite, but not hardly at all. I just don't think that adds up to her. And she's got to be at a point in her life where there's just probably other things that interest her. Now, she could prove us wrong. She could decide to fight again. I don't know, but boy, it just feels to me like, especially after seeing her, because when we were coming down at T-Mobile Arena, we were told by UFC PR that we were going to talk to Amanda Nunes, Cody Garbrandt, Dominic Cruz, and TJ Dillashaw, and that they were going to ask Ronda. And, of course, there was no Ronda. And once I saw that, she wasn't interested in being